All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I'm Hannah, and today I will be presenting to you the major sleeping disorders, which include insomnia, narcolepsy, sleep apnea, and night terrors. I'll be discussing the symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment available for them. So, to start off, sleeping disorders are very common through all ages. And some statistics are 50 to 70 million U.S. adults have a sleeping disorder, and 100,000 deaths occur each year in U.S. hospitals due to medical errors because people aren't getting enough sleep or they're not paying attention and they get distracted in their daily routines, work, and anywhere else. And drowsy driving is responsible for 1,550 fatalities and 40,000 non-fatal injuries annually in the United States. So to start off, I'm going to talk about one of the first major sleeping disorders, insomnia. And there are 3 types: transient, short-term, and chronic insomnia. And insomnia is difficulty falling and staying asleep. So the first one is usually around 4 weeks, and it's mostly when you're having stress within your home. And short term is 4 weeks to 6 months, and it's stress at home, work, and it can include medical problems. That's why you're having insomnia. And chronic is about 6 months or more, and it's when you're having poor sleep every night to most nights. So you're counting sheets trying to fall asleep because you can't sleep. Next is narcolepsy, and this shows the normal sleep cycle that we usually have. It goes from light sleep to deep, and narcolepsy it disrupts your normal sleep cycle, and it's because you're having uncontrollable sleep attacks, which is when you could be sitting in the class and just crash out of nowhere. That's when you know you have narcolepsy. And narcolepsy is like a nervous system disorder, so it's not just a sleeping disorder, but it's also problems within your nervous system. And it is caused by, scientists believe that is caused by a decrease in hypocreatine, which is involved in appetite and sleeping patterns. So your sleeping pattern is off, like the sleep cycle. And in the U.S., it is estimated 200,000 people are affected by this disorder, but not even a quarter of them are diagnosed. So it's common, and most people don't get diagnosed when they have sleeping disorders because all the stress everyone's under anyways. And then next, we have sleep apnea, and this shows the normal sleeping when you have your throat and your uvula and there's like a airflow going through, and this shows sleep apnea, how there's a blocked airway and there's no way for the oxygen when you're breathing to go through. And there's 2 types, which is obstructive and central. Obstructive is most common, and it's when the throat relaxes, resulting in blocked airway, which is the first shown picture. And then central is non-common, and it's when the brain isn't sending signals to your muscles to tell you to breathe properly. And the signals that control your breathing. And central at the bottom, the second type, snoring isn't really common for people who have that type of sleep apnea. And I have a personal experience relating to sleep apnea. My brother Troy, he has sleep apnea, and the options for diagnosis is having an overnight stay at the hospital or at home. And at home, you use a machine that collects information of how many times you're breathing or stopping or choking, trying to gasp for air when you're sleeping. And so he used the machine at home, and he sent the information to the hospital. And his result was he stopped breathing an average of 70 times in 1 hour. So he had to get a device, and options for this is getting devices or appliances to help you through your sleep apnea, and his device he used was a mouth guard, and it actually helped him get through sleep apnea and his snoring. Second, I would like to show the stages of sleep because it relates to my next slide. And I just want to emphasize stage 3 and 4 because it goes from light to starting to your heart rate slows down, and then deep sleep starts and your brain starts to generate slow waves at 3. And at stage 4, you're at a very deep sleep and your muscle activity is limited because you're kind of just falling into it. So our next major disorder is night terrors. And it shows it's most common in children because you're having nightmares and you're having a hard time sleeping because right when you fall asleep you're terrified. So that shows a kid and his teddy bear being snatched from him. And this emerges from stages 3 and 4. So right there and there it is starting to evolve into night terrors. And it's when there's high arousal and appearance of being terrified and confused, and some of the symptoms are crying or shaking in their sleep or becoming excessive sweat. And it's vivid experiences you're having of being frightened in your sleep. And then I'm going to talk about the diagnosis. That's just the definition of diagnosis. And there are 2 different types, which one of them, it shows the brain waves, the heart rate, body movement, and breathing overnight sleep study, which I mentioned in sleep apnea, how you can use the machine from the hospital. So that's monitoring how many times, like I said, how he was 70 times in 1 hour. And then this one is multi-step latency, which is measured daytime sleepiness. So when you're just doing your everyday thing, you're falling asleep and you're not getting enough sleep you need, so you're falling asleep during your daily activities. So those are the diagnosis of 2 different types that you can get. And then I'm going to talk about the symptoms. There's nighttime symptoms and daytime symptoms for all these major disorders. And some of the nighttime is having snoring all the time, and that could be for sleep apnea, the first type, because the second type, snoring isn't common. And it could be pausing in breath, gasping or choking for air when you're just normally sleeping, or restless sleep, so you're not getting the correct sleep you need because you're not fully having a good sleep. And then there's daytime symptoms, which is daytime sleepiness, like this man at work, wherever he is. And there's lack of concentration and distraction in routine activities, so your daily routines, you're just not doing them correctly. And early headaches in the morning is another symptom of one of the major sleeping disorders. And then I'd like to talk about the treatment. There are several types of treatment for sleeping disorders, but I'll just name some of them. And there are also natural options I didn't include, but that would be, nutrition and exercise is one of the natural treatments for sleeping disorders, but other ones could be behavioral therapy, but that's more for night terrors and stuff like that to get your mentally stable so you're not having those thoughts continuously. And there's medication for many of them, and devices and appliances like the mouth guards, the machines, there's breathing machines, stuff like that. And you could get surgery to correct constriction. That could be from your nasal congestion or your breathing in general. And then the nutrition and exercise, because that's a big part in getting yourself healthy in order to have the correct sleep you need. And then in conclusion, while discussing some of the major sleeping disorders and their treatments, we learned sleeping disorders are a major problem with people today because all of the stress we put ourselves under, from our personal lives to our business lives. But with these problems, there are many ways to seek and try treatment that fits your needs so you can cure sleeping disorders and have a healthy, restful night so you're not struggling with all these things and you can be a happy sleeper like Baby's feathers. Thank you.
Michelle, are you here? So Michelle's not here. I'm going to be offering the comments then first because we don't have somebody assigned to that other than Michelle. And this is where we're going to discover when people are not still in the class. All right, Hannah, I think there's a very good speech here that is missing a couple of things that would raise it to being excellent. You don't really have an attention device. Basically, you just start with, here's my topic, here's who I am, here's my topic, and here's the preview, and here we go. And you need to lead us in a little bit more. I thought your conclusion was a lot better at doing that kind of thing, creating a little bit more interest and giving us some insight and summarizing what you're talking about. So that was a little bit of a problem. But structurally, you do have a clear statement of what the purpose is, and there's a very good preview. Some of that information that you have in the first section, before you actually get into speech, that should be your attention device. The statistics about the number of people who are injured in hospitals because somebody made a mistake, probably because they're tired, or the number of car accidents that happen on the road as a result of drowsy driving, or those sorts of things. That should be your attention device. That should be the stuff up front at the speech. And then it also justifies us listening to that particular subject and say, okay, there's a reason that we're talking about this. And I think, like I said, I think you've got the content there. It's just, it feels a little bit like you needed to go through it one more time and say, maybe this should go here and this should go there. The opening, I think, is the place where there were the most issues. The rest of the speech is very easily organized. It's topical in nature. There's maybe one or two suggestions I'd make about organization that would be a little bit different. For instance, your transitions between points, mostly you're just relying on a signpost and slide to make the transition. It would be nice if you had some language that got you to the next point a little bit more effectively, and it would be smoother then. As it is, it feels like, sharp right turn, sharp left turn, and we know where we are because you're telling us, but it does seem to come a little bit abruptly, and I think the transitions would help a bit with that. I think that there's a lot of supporting material in the speech, and none of it gets cited. You don't give us any source citations in the presentation, and I know that you're not making up this information about the material. You got it someplace, but you are not giving us a source citation on it during the presentation, and that's a problem. So that's another thing that you could fix. But as an introduction to these issues, I thought you did a pretty thorough job. The visual materials, there's some nice things about them. I think they develop interest and recall with some of the pictures that you're using, and they're cute little cartoon images and some dramatic images that go along with that to help us remember what it is you're talking about. Plus you have a couple of diagrams that you've integrated into the speech. I did think that section where you were talking about the stages of sleep, this is where there's an organizational issue. I think that might work better earlier on in the speech, because it seems to me like some of the disorders that you're talking about are probably related to the different stages being interrupted or problematic or not developing. And in fact, in one section, you do kind of bounce back and say, like, here, this happens here. If the stages of sleep had been first, then it would have made a little bit more sense. You could refer back to them in each of those particular points, and I think that would have worked nicely. You don't need the title slide, like we talked about, so let's get rid of that. And probably you need to practice a little bit more, because you deliver half the time to the screen. You just turn sideways and start looking up at the screen and talking to the screen instead of talking to us. And we're not heavily emphasizing the delivery thing on this particular presentation, but in the future we are going to be talking about that, and that's the next speech. And if you were doing that, that would be a big problem. It doesn't make a good impression on the audience. It's like, well, don't you know your speech? Why do you have, you're reading along with us, looking at the script, instead of you telling us. And you don't quite become the narrator of your slideshow, but you're on the brink of doing that. So, all right, thank you.